Good day to you, sir. What an honor to be speaking with you today.
You were welcome. I'm like, we just do Zoom. I'm not even knowing what the link is, man. Y'all getting too.
This is too much.
I'm like, I'm not getting frustrated. They're getting ready to call me. I'm like, tell the sister just to give me your number. I'll give you my number. It's all good. So, if we should get, lost in the sauce, you've got my number. Okay?
I appreciate your patience, sir. So, listen, the story of a 3-day pass. My God. So, just really quickly, it's a 1968 black and white film written and directed by Melvin Van Peebles, your father. It's his first feature-length film based on his fourth novel. The first thing that came to mind once I watched it, after being mesmerized by his style of filmmaking, was, I'm so glad that I got to experience this.
Yeah. It's it's interesting for a lot of reasons. I think it's an interesting film for him because he has it's sort of a bittersweet, irreverent humor that he has, and he sort of gets the joke of humanity. Like, I grew up with a man that understood good allies come in all colors. They don't always look like you, vote like you, etc. But he sort of gets the joke of life and that even I remember once he was going to run he started running. He said, I was so focused on climbing the mountain, I didn't focus on taking care of my body. And he said, I want to get in better shape. So he started running. And my sister and I would go, he'd run a mile. Next thing he's running 5 miles. And then next thing he's meeting with a group of runners and they're running out to the airport. He's in New York. He's running out to JFK. I mean, that's a long ass run.
Wow.
And then he said one day, he said, all right, I'm ready. I'm going to run a marathon. And so we went to brunch the day before the marathon together. So my sister and I and there and some other folks. And he got up and then we noticed he was gone. Where he went. And then we heard some whimpering and it was coming from under the table. And we lifted up the tablecloth and there's Melvin Van Peebles curled up in the fetal position under the table. I said, Pop, what are you doing? He said, I'm scared. And he was okay with showing us the other Melvins. He said he had 4 or 5 Melvins. He said one who's political, one who's business minded, all these other different Melvins. And that device that he uses where the soldier talks to himself in the mirror and divides up his different selves, or even his fantasy self. He'd play with, the brother's vibe on what he envisions their romance to be, and her vibe is running through the jungle. So she's looking at him on some Mandingo shit, and he's looking at her and some, Bridgerton. He's on Bridgerton before Bridgerton.
A great comparison.
So he had a great sort of ability to, get into different truths about who we are, and it's got a sweetness to it, but it is a bittersweet.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting film to see, from him. He's a quirky.
It is. I really enjoyed it, and I mean, I felt like I was watching cinema for the first time ever. Right, coming from the present day era of film and then going back to see what that looked like and him being at the helm of it. That was quite the experience for me. And I can only imagine what it's going to be once this is out for the world to see, for people that aren't even aware of that new wave style of film, the black and white, the 35 millimeter. And I think what stood out to me is also the way he shot his films. It was this experimentation and freedom of expression that kind of jumped out to me, that I was stuck on that. There were so many things about this.
It's interesting because if you think back to a film like She's Gotta Have It,
right?
But yeah, if you look at some of those films, you'll see that you can see influences. Sure. Even the shot where he does the dolly moves through the club, you know,
Oh,
where the character sort of glides through the club is something that you'll see, you know, filmmakers like Spike did a little bit of that, you know, in some of the films where he sort of does that glide move. But it's sort of, he'll break rules. He'll play with rules. He'll break them. He'll go, you know, characters like you right now and me will talk right to the camera sometimes.
right.
And he'll poke fun at us, at the, you know, but all of us, from the captain to the old black lady, the black ladies that want to be shown around the base later, you know, all of it. Yeah, it's sweet. It's also a trip because I've been writing something called Free Thinker about my parents.
Mm.
And my mom came and stayed with my dad at the base when he was in the Air Force. And, you know, my mom's white, dad is black. And at the time, you couldn't have a person stay at the base who was not a relative.
Right.
And so with their sense of humor, they're both radical free thinkers. They're both in their 20s. So when they pulled up to the guard gate, you know, he was an officer, so they had to salute him. And they go over, and he's sitting there with this neon white chick, my mom, and she hands him her ID and says her maiden name was Marks. And she says, and the guy looks at her, she goes, and Melvin says, "This is my cousin Maria." And he's like, "Nigga, please." and she hands him her ID, and she says, "Yes, Marks is my slave name." And so they would just play with people, you know what I mean? And then that all ruse started to go when I started to come into the picture. They're like, "We got to get across the border," so they left to get across the border to Mexico, and hence I got the name Mario. I mean, brothers do know name Mario, you know. So they met. They were at the base. He was in the Air Force. You know, a lot of that. If you look at this movie, you say, "Okay, I can see bits." Yeah.
It's drawn from his life experiences. So what were the series of events that led to the restoration of this classic film? And then what was your involvement in reintroducing it back to present day?
Right. So, Indie Collect was key in it. And Sandra Schulberg over there has been a fan of Melvin's and a friend. And so she was really instrumental in overseeing it. So I got with her, and they did a good job. And then we went. They showed it in LA, so my dad was able to see it, which was great.
Wow,
Love the viewing of it. But it's lovely to have things like this restored, so audiences today can get a little taste of what it was and where things started. And one of the things Dad often says is he's sort of credited with being sort of, in a lot of ways, the godfather of modern black cinema. But
that's right.
Before Sweetback, there was this film, and this film really broke it because, you know, he had to go to France to do it. So it's not only, you know, a film from a certain time period, but it's a film from a different, you know, that he had to make in a different country, and it became the French entry to the San Francisco Film Festival. They had no idea that an American had directed it, let alone a Black American.
That's right.
And so it was when the film won at I think it was '68 Film Festival, they were welcoming him at the airport, and they had a little sign saying "Tu Mario Van Peebles," and he, being he's a prankster, so he rolls up on this little lady with blue hair, and he tells the story, and he goes, "Bon alors, c'est moi, je suis Melvin." And she says, "I'm sorry, I'm looking for Melvin Van Peebles." He goes, "Well, c'est moi, je suis Melvin Van Peebles." She thought maybe the nigger was Dutch, but not.
Of course.
So then they have a little limo for him to go, and so he sees a Black Panther hitchhike. He goes, "Yeah, I got to get my cousin." So they stop and get his cousin. And by the time they know they got 4 or 5 other brothers and sisters, he just giving folks rides. And, you know, goes to a hotel, the Chateau Marmont, where a couple of years later, he was riding a cable car and would not have been able to stay at that hotel. So, yeah, man, big changes.
He was very strategic, and you kind of just answered the next question I had. He was very strategic in how he went about getting this film made, right? He was, for lack of a better, term, was kind of pushed out of Hollywood because of, their rejection of independent Black filmmakers. So his tenacity just took him wherever it is he thought he needed to be to make it happen. And then he did. And this, has been described as being among the great American films of the 60s. That, I think, is the biggest thing that resonated for me after watching this and doing my research. Why do you think it was the biggest, one of the biggest films of the 60s? What's your take on that?
I think it's an important film because, you think of films like Sounder, which came in, I guess, later on. There's a certain joy and a certain bounce, a certain irreverent quality that my dad brings to cinema that, you think, even now, there's a lot of films that are sort of Black trauma centric.
Mm.
You see it sort of traumatized. And there are isms. Dad and I talked about that in whatever business you go into, there's going to be some isms. Lookism, sexism, racism, classism. Right. So be in the business you want to be in. But what I was impressed with him, in my life, is that he never let the isms make him bitter.
Mm.
Because that does something different to the artist. Right?
Right.
And so I think that shows in this film. So I think a lot of films, even Sounder, other films that were, from us, always had to do with, or often had to do with, sort of suffering under the weight of American apartheid on some level. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
for sure.
This one, the brothers in France, and you don't know how it's going to be. And there's a certain sort of what the fuck quality to him that's sort of there's an everyman quality there. And I remember my father talking about there will always be the talented 10th, what Du Bois refers to, that will climb up, that will pull themselves up from the bootstraps.
Mm.
The average cat, the average brother and sister. I was talking even to Chris Rock, and we were talking about how, there will always be the Malcolm or the King or the Singleton or even a Van Peebles, if you will, that'll climb up, and there'll be a few that trickle down. But the average brother and sister, like the average white cat, could make a living at a factory and send his kids to school and do whatever. It was the average person make it. And this brother in the movie is not a super Negro. He's not Portier. He's not Harry Belafonte. He's an average brother. You know what I mean? He's not extraordinary stuff. We were saying at the time, that to the equivalency of, and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, or there was another one where Portier is a doctor dating a shop girl. Yeah, I think it's Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. But the equivalency was, you're working in a shop and I'm a doctor. But there's still an equivalency because you won.
Yeah.
With this moment, just going, this is a regular brother and a regular French chick, and we just peoples.
And that's what made it so relatable. That's what made Turner's character so incredibly relatable.
Right. So the Black character is not otherized. He's not, and I think that part of it was, okay, here's my long answer. And that is, if you look at where it is in a historical context, when we were trying to be colored, colored was, there's white and then there's colored. Colored's just maybe slightly different from white. And the subtext of colored is, please recognize our humanity. Let us have a seat at this lunch counter beside you. Please let us go to these schools with you and maybe drink at the same water fountain. We're just like you. We're clean and we're smart and we're handy and we're just colored. Now, after they shoot, Malcolm says freedom by any means, and Dr. King says freedom by peaceful means. and they kill them. Folks get tired of being colored.
Absolutely.
Forget that. Black power. We're black. Let's just go. Forget color. And so the subtext of black is that is as different from white as can be. We're not saying power at the expense of white power. We're not saying black beauty or black is beautiful and that other beauties aren't. But we're going to recognize our own beauty. We're going to have our afros. We're going to have our panthers. We're no longer going to straighten our hair. We're not going to try to look like Ingrid Bergman or whoever it is. We're going to do us. Black power, black beauty. And so you have a whole different look. But so you have to look at this movie was made at a time when we were still trying to be colored. And yet Melvin makes the cat just an average cat who walks into a bar and does this thing just like, hey, I'm just seeing what's up. And that's a very different film contextually. You see what I'm saying? Because that's the time is Guess Who's Coming to Dinner and those other kind of films where we had the best we could be, which was Poitier and Belafonte and Diane Carroll. And they were the cleanest and the brightest. And the very best. Yes. They were Dr. Kings. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it wasn't later. So Melvin does this film during the color time. And later, he looks at film and says, you know what? I see the peace and freedom party represented in films like Easy Rider in cinema. And I may see plays like Hair represented in theater, but we're still on some Raisin in the Sun stuff. Mm-hmm. That, but he comes and he puts black power on the screen with Sweetback. And that's the first time you said, oh, the revolution has now been televised. It's official. And it ain't supposed to die a natural death on Broadway. The revolution has been put on the stage. You know what I mean? So he didn't walk in step with what was happening culturally in the same way. And so in a sort of very, in a way, it's the brother, and her in the movie, they're not sophisticated about their romance. You know what I mean? It's not smooth. It's not. It's everyman. It's all the awkward.
It's right. It's the traditional awkwardness of a new romance where you don't know what he's thinking, what she's thinking. You're in your head about it all.
Totally. It's a first date. It's a first date. It's a first date. It's not smooth. It's not. It's not that other stuff yet. And in no way is it a super Negro type deal. And so there's a freshness to it that I think is sweet. So I think it was important. I think it's important, and that it's captures something about the naivete of early romance and just the human condition.
And so will there be other films of his that will be restored that we can get to re-experience again?
I hope so. I think that I'm working with the Criterion folks to bring a restoration of other pictures. He did Sweetback, Don't Play Us Cheap,
wow.
Watermelon Man, and I think they might even put my film Badass, where I play my father when he made Sweetback.
That's right. That's right.
So they'll be. I think we're going to try to do something with all of them and see what state they're in. But they did a good job with 3 Days.
They did an excellent job, and that was honestly one of the things I kept thinking about when you think about how delicate that original film is. That restoration process must have been a doozy. I can't even imagine what that must have been like.
Yeah. Where are you now? Are you in the West Coast?
Right now, I'm in Charlotte, hanging out with my parents.
Okay. I'm in New Jersey filming Wu-Tang Clan.
Oh wow. Okay, I'm from New Jersey. By the way, yeah.
Yeah, it's for the Hulu show.
Okay, so that was going to be one of my closing questions. What do you have? What are you working on now that we should be on the lookout for? So, can you talk a bit about the Wu-Tang Clan project?
Yeah, I can. So I'm doing that, getting to work with RZA on that, which is dope. I love music. I finished the Salt and Pepper biopic prior to this.
Okay.
So similar period as when I did New Jack City was 91.
Oh, okay.
This interesting period.
Nice.
I made the deal to bring my father's play Ain't Supposed to Die a Natural Death back to Broadway when Broadway reopens. So that's going to be, I don't know if you saw Ain't Supposed to Die a Natural Death, but I think it's one of his crowning achievements. It's such a good piece of work.
I'm looking forward to seeing that. And when is that expected to come out? Next year or at some point?
Yeah, I guess it's, it is sort of more COVID centric.
Yeah. Okay.
Broadway. So I don't know. It looks like I'm going to do another Western. I've been wanting to do another Western for a while, after doing Posse.
Posse is a classic of mine. My God.
Thank you. I had mad fun with that, and it was kind of a game changer for a lot of folks because they were not, for folks who didn't know about Bass or Ice and Dart or Deadwood Dick or Stagecoach Mary. Seeing us in the West was
that's right,
kind of a trip. But for folks who do know, they got the references, and America made more Westerns than any type of other genre initially. Mm-hmm. And across the board, people of color and women were pretty marginalized in Westerns.
Sure.
Or, women were, needed rescuing. And Native Americans, they said the only good Indian was a dead Indian. And, Latinos, brothers and sisters, were the oily bandit that didn't need no stinking batches.
Wow.
Hopsing was the houseboy, and Black folks were scared and shuffled. So when I did Posse and I didn't succumb to that, and I like to, I have people of all colors in my family, as you know.
Yeah.
I even have a Trumper hidden in there. I'm not talking about that one, but I got to love everybody. So when I make film, I like to mix it up, and I think that's another thing you'll see in our films, even in New Jack City, how I handle the I wanted kids to say no. You got to have role models to say yes to. So the cops were Wong, who's Asian, Judd Nelson, who's Jewish, and Ice-T play one of the cops, and Sister play the prosecutor that takes Nino down. And then I played one of the cops too. So I like to mix it up because I think, as Dr. King said, you either learn to live together as brothers and sisters in harmony, or we perish together as fools. And
that's right.
The challenge of, and now it's learn to live together in harmony with each other and nature as well. That the challenges are real. So make cinema that makes us think a little bit. Make cinema that entertains, but provokes. It has a thought.
Absolutely. And
so that's something I hope to continue to do, and I'm blessed to do it for a while. So it's pretty fun.
Amen to that. I mean, and lucky for us as the viewers that get to experience that. I also noticed the same level of diversity in the story of a 3-day pass. So
right.
That's appreciated.
Correct. Yeah, and again, I think this is a brother from Chicago who had to go to a different country, teach himself a language. Learn to be a journalist in that language, learn to write and create in that language. These are tall. Not a lot of people do that.
No, he's a unicorn. He's a unicorn. And he wrote a book in French. Like, my God, like.
Yeah. So he's an interesting cat to be around.
Oh, I could imagine.
And that one, you start to understand that we're kind of wired to really function in groups about maybe 50 to 100 people maximum. That we feel safest with people that all know our name or our, and that beyond that. So if you go into a school, you can see it with kids. If you go to a school where there's 2,000 people, you won't know 2,000 people. You'll know 50 people in your clique. You'll be in the email clique, or the engineering club, or the book club, or the jocks, or whatever. But you'll find a subset group to exist with. And so we have a tendency towards global tribalism. If we're all brown, like in India, beautiful brown people will fight over I'm Hindu, you're Muslim.
Yeah.
We're white, we'll fight over I'm Irish, you're British. Or we're all African, we'll find some other division. So we have a tendency to global tribalize. Now, in this country, that's been broken down more along racial lines.
Mm-hmm.
But when you understand it more, we're all human. And that's what I think comes out when you see in 3 Day Pass is we all have these vulnerabilities and insecurities and strengths and weaknesses. And the sooner you don't see yourself as the target and understand that, the more you get a perspective that allows you to get and laugh at the joke of life.
Mm. That sums it up beautifully, Mario. Janus Films is going to release the story of the 3 Day Pass on May 7th, this Friday, both theatrically and virtually in New York and Los Angeles. Last question. What do you want people to know about this film?
I think he had done a couple of shorts prior to this. I think that he was willing to take great risks before it was popular and to have a very specific vision. And he also had the people skills to be able to inspire others to play ball with him. You know, there's always two factors to making a film. There's the making of the film, and then there is the managing and inspiring and empowering the team that you have to make it with. And that requires energy and people skills and know-how, and he's got to do it. He's a brother from Chicago who's got to be bilingual enough to, to get some of the original colonizers to play ball with him.
Yeah, that is no small feat for sure.
That's a whole movie right there, So
colonizers.
Yes, I think that it's not just the making of the movie, but you understand where he was and what he had to do to get it done, and then how much chutzpah that takes. Yep. My dad once said to me, he said, Mario, if I was smart, I wouldn't have done any of this shit.
What?
I said, what do you mean, Dad? He said, well, smart people know science and they know aerodynamics, and he was an astronomer. He said, so I can tell you, for example, the bumblebee shouldn't be able to fly because it's not aerodynamically sound. Like birds are aerodynamically sound. When they fly, they look like arrows and they're aerodynamically sound. But a bumblebee doesn't understand that it's not aerodynamically sound, so the motherfucker flies anyway.
He makes it happen.
I mean, it was common knowledge. You think back to it, common knowledge that with us being 13% of America's population, Black folks, that we could never get beyond governor. Anything else was you're going to run Shirley or whoever, Al Sharpton, run him for president, but it was more of a statement run versus a real run. But so we just accepted that. And then those white kids in Iowa said, no, we could see this. And they voted for Obama. And suddenly we're like, but that's not supposed to, wait a minute. You know what I mean? So nobody was like, you're like, how'd you get there? How'd you get there? He goes, well, they didn't let me in at the bottom. So he's that kind of brother,
Yeah.
Which means we'll either go, it's like, he'll either be a joke or he'll be a maverick and a groundbreaker, and we go, because if he didn't make it, we go, there was so many I told you so's ready to go, I told you so, and then he does it. And I talked to Ossie Davis at length about this when he did Sweetback, and my Ossie was like, he'd come in and say, we gotta control production, and we gotta do this. And Ossie said, we all said, that's great, Melvin. How you gonna do that? And did it. So this, as I would say to quote my dad, keep on keeping on. He finds a way. He'll make a way out of no way. And I think that's, and here he does it. And it's not a heavy film. It's not Black suffrage. It's not Black trauma.
Right.
It's human. It almost feels like, in some ways, a coming of age story in a way. You know what I mean? It's got a
Yeah.
sweet, like I said, a very sort of great romantic first love kind of thing to it.
With little specks of just casual covert racism, just to spice things up, just to
Oh,
spice
yeah.
it
Well, it's part of the reality of where it is, but it's
right,
like how he deals with
right.
it, how he sees himself, and which is fun. So it's not, and it's what I like is it's not just from one character's point of view.
Exactly.
It's not like I get it, and the white folks are racist, or the white folks get it, and the poor black guy he didn't get it. Do you know what I mean? It's like there's an overview. Whoever's making the film understands her fantasy, understands his fantasy, and can have fun on the mix-up. So it's almost made with it's got a freshness to it, but it's made with a God's eye view in a way, and 30,000 feet view of like I'm looking at humanity and I'm seeing her dynamics and his dynamics and human dynamics, and I think that's what makes it relatable.
A relatable vantage point. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Listen, thank you so much for your time and for this incredible conversation. I am looking forward to what you have coming out, and also, rewatching your father's classic films. Thank you. Thank you so much.